And I'm Ava, and this is Roy. So we have Steve on the phone. So hi, Steve. Say hello to audience if you want to.
Hi, hey, how you doing, guys? It's a good Easter weekend, and welcome all the Lao Beijing and all the leaders of the whistleblower movement, new federal state of China, and all of our friends and colleagues in mainland China.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bannon. So my first question, so we're going to talk a lot about a trade war and tariff war that's going on. So my first question is Xi Jinping is a lifetime dictator in the one-party communist regime and a strategic thinker and actor. He does not answer to the Chinese people or face the constraints of electoral system. Unlike President Trump, he must. So during the first trade talk back in 2018, Xi Jinping basically engaged in talks and then stalled and more talks and betting on the pendulum effect of the U.S. partisan politics and hoping that it will bury everything for him when the election comes. So what lesson did Americans learn from this past experience?
I think, in particular, the war and policy, the engaged Americans. I'm not sure that it's filtered down and people know it broadly, of which we're working on, because it's a quite brilliant question, and probably one of the most important questions that's being asked, Ava, behind closed doors here in the imperial capital, the nation's capital. Let's go back. Remember, Trump's tax cuts, which we're talking about now, making permanent in 2017, did lead to an economic kind of revival. And in 2018 and particularly 2019, yes, things were coming back quite strong. And Trump, given all the problems he had with the deep state, was forecast, particularly because the Democrats at that time were in terrible shape. They had Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, some of these populists, but they weren't getting traction. They really didn't have a candidate. Mayor Buttigieg, and it was just a nightmare. Trump looked like he was going to win in 2020 and might win big. So President Trump had taken 2 years, and you're right. In 2018, went out of his way to drag his feet, but he took 2 years to set the system right with the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese leadership. That comes after when we first started, had Xi come to Mar-a-Lago, which I basically coordinated. The decision coming out is that the hardest core nationalists, Peter Navarro, Stephen K. Bannon, and Stephen Miller, would not really be in charge. It would really be Cohen and people like that would do the first attempt of putting something together with the Chinese. We disagreed with it, but I told my colleagues, I said, let these guys do it. They will come back in a couple of months and be a failure because President Trump will never support what they want to do. Cut to June of 2017. They actually had a Chinese official come over. It was going to be a signing of some document. And when I made sure that President Trump was briefed the day before, he totally rejected it, said no way. Bob Lighthizer had been in there, so Navarro, Lighthizer, myself, and others, Stephen Miller and others, began this journey of Lighthizer in the lead. And over the next 2 years, with Xi dragging his feet, but putting Li He as the lead negotiator, by May of 2019, there was a draft outline that was ready to basically be put in a formal context and to be signed. And that Lighthizer-Navarro deal kind of solved the 7 original sins of the Chinese Communist Party as far as state-owned industries, brutal treatment of Lao Beijing workers, just everything. And in the One Belt, One Road meeting in early May of 2019, it was attended by Putin. And there was a lot of, at that time, the predatory capitalism of the Chinese Communist Party had not really reversed on them. So they were feeling, hey, we got the One Belt, One Road going. We're tying in Southern Asia, the Eurasian landmass, with Africa, and eventually it's going to railhead in Europe. We've kind of got this. And Putin was sitting there going, yeah, I'm your partner. So they told Li He, Wan Qishan, and Miles was so good on this back in those days because this was really quite, frankly, leading to the Hong Kong situation. Wan Qishan told Xi, we're not going to do this. We're going to tell the Americans, basically spit in President Trump's face. Immediately after that is Hong Kong, and then you have the summer military games of which the pandemic was released, right, the bioweapon. And the rest is history. The President Trump has gone out of his way to try to integrate the Chinese Communist Party into the world's economy. She and Wang Xi have no interest. In fact, they declared a people's war in May of 2019 against President Trump of the United States. And that's kind of where we are today. Your point's very well taken. The American people, the people that are engaged in anti-CCP efforts, and people on Capitol Hill that have been, had classified briefings, understand where we stand today. The American people will support President Trump because bringing manufacturing jobs back. But folks should understand, this is highly contentious. Now, we just had a little while ago, President Trump has announced there's been at least some sort of senior level outreach, not the Xi level, but I think senior level outreach. A little bit was teased yesterday in Bloomberg, but I do believe there's been some outreach at the Secretary of Treasury's level. So it looks like there may be, we're already rapidly in negotiations with 5 or 6 of the big countries in East Asia. That would be Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam, and India. India obviously being South Asia. But that's proceeding in a process, and now I think you're going to have some initial, at least outreach from the Chinese Communist Party.
So thank you, Steve, to explain the past, the last round of a trade talk, the progress and the process very well. But there is just actually right before the show, about an hour ago, there was a report everywhere on social media saying that Trump said himself, he is about to make the great deal with the CCP happen, with the China happen. So that message really concerns us, because we know the few weeks ago carving out electronic tax tariffs on electronics and on a few items for cell phones and iPhones are a tactical move. But how do you interpret it in terms of what Trump had just said, and in terms of looking back all those experience, what can guarantee that the CCP this time would not release something else like what they did? Because we know the problem are not going away. They wanted to destroy United States, period.
Yeah, I think you have to be very, very, very careful. I think you have to be very careful about the CCP. And I wouldn't, President Trump is a deal person. He likes doing deals. He likes putting deals together. He's changing the entire, he's reorganizing the entire world's commercial relationships here. I'm always very suspect of the Chinese Communist Party. I don't trust them. I don't think they're the legitimate ruler of the Chinese people. So I always offer caution, particularly since we still have the fentanyl, chemical warfare going on, although it's dropped by 50% because of Trump's tariffs. We're hearing that from the New York Times. So I'm always very suspect of this. But I also don't think the Chinese Communist Party is going to be easy to negotiate with. Although the economy is very bad, I think they've kind of made a Faustian bargain that they can't get to. They want to decouple. They can't seem like they're abandoning decoupling when they really want to decouple from us. And so I think I would, watch this space and see how it proceeds every day. President Trump is, like I said, a deal maker and is always want to try to make a deal. He did it for 2 years with the Chinese, and they didn't appreciate his efforts. So let's see how this turns out.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Steve, I'm so glad that you mentioned the fact that Chinese Communist Party is not a legitimate ruler of the Chinese people. Because last time we talked about like post-communist China and new federal state, a lot of people don't know that 90% of Chinese people, including the government officials inside the CCP, are actually pro-America. Like culturally, historically, geographically, like there's no reason for being an adversary of the United States, actually. So the decisions were made not by the people, but by the Chinese Communist Party and just a few families, and now Xi himself. And also the deep state in the West. It's not a reflection of the will of the people. So could you elaborate on the idea you and Miles mentioned a lot of times about the 1,000-year peace deal between China and U.S. after the elimination
I
of
don't
CCP?
I don't think there's any doubt if Lao Beijing was running China, which we're not right now. And you're absolutely correct. People, particularly in America, don't understand. There's about 100,000, a couple 100,000 members of the CCP, and really 5 factions, 5 big family groups or factions kind of run the deal. And these people are wealthier than the Gulf Emirates and Saudi Arabia. They're the wealthiest families in the world, full stop. And they specialize and focus on getting their cash out of China and putting it into real estate in the West End of London and Midtown Manhattan. And also gold and government securities and American government bonds. I mean, it's all phony when they say they're an enemy. They send kids, the princelings all go, the ones that are not too lazy and at least they have some modicum of education, which some of the princelings don't. They just want to party. That the princelings go to the finest schools in the United States. They go to Harvard and Stanford and all that. You don't see there the children of the Lao Beijing. You see the children of the princelings. And so, the Chinese Communist Party, and we know for a fact that Wang Qishan is very concerned about this. And as he's gotten a little out of the day-to-day of running things, because he's not as active as he used to be given his age and his health, he's obsessed. My sources tell me he's obsessed with this study of the legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party vis-a-vis the Chinese people and the Chinese state. And here's why. They realized that, the revolution and the Civil War left them up in the mountains in an area they controlled, but it wasn't a vast part of real estate, and they didn't really have huge cells throughout the rest of the nation. They just didn't. It was during the war when they spent more time fighting Chiang Kai-shek than the Japanese, and the sacrifice of the Chinese people of Lao Beijing during the Second World War is one of the most unheralded stories of World War II, where there were 30 or 35 million people killed. Not all of those by the Japanese. Some of that was an internal civil war between the two factions. After the war, essentially, because of infiltration of Marxists and communists in the State Department, there was very much a slant of news coming out of China about the Chinese Communist Party and how they were taking care of people. It was like an agrarian revolution, and they weren't like the Bolsheviks, right? They were more agrarian revolution. That was all lies told by communists in the American government. And the people in America have a great fondness for China. Since China was opened, and Americans sent missionaries, and they sent money for the children, and there's a great fondness in regard for China and the Chinese people. So that was played off on. The American government essentially turned it over. General Marshall, these people being hoodwinked by Zhou Enlai and Mao Zedong, turned the country over to the Chinese Communist Party. Now, the Chinese did win some big military victories. I don't say that. The Kuomintang was totally corrupt. Chiang Kai-shek was totally corrupt, and on top of that, being incompetent. But there were a lot of things came together. 50 years later, the Chinese people, Lao Beijing, and particularly the students, the young people, rose up again in every city, not just in Beijing. Beijing was the leader, and stood up on the world stage and said no more. And as soon as they built the Goddess of Liberty, which was a replica in honor of the Statue of Liberty, that's when Deng Xiaoping, these guys said, we got to shut this down. We're going to shut it down hard with tanks. And it was a slaughter. And that slaughter has still never come out to the American people. The two things the Chinese Communist Party never wants you to talk about, ever, is the Cultural Revolution, where they slaughtered hundreds of million, and Tiananmen Square, where they slaughtered tens of thousands throughout the country, just not in Beijing. And so that set the table for the globalists in the United States, the Scowcroft and the Bush regime, to get in business with the Chinese Communist Party. And here we are today. But the legitimacy is that they have never had the Chinese people as a broad swath. Forget democracy. I'm just talking a popular support of this revolutionary group. It's just not broad-based, and they know it. Wang Qishan is not a dumb person. He's an evil person, but he's certainly, I think, one of the smarter people in the world. And he understands, in his advanced age, he's spending his time thinking through how they legitimize. They go from a quote-unquote revolutionary government to a legitimate government. And this is the great opportunity we have with Lao Beijing if they know that people have their back and support their fight for freedom. Mm-hmm. And that's what this comes down to. This whole economic and trade war, the economic war, unrestricted warfare, everything that they're doing against the West is on the backs of the Chinese labor, the Chinese worker, who is abused like no worker in the world. The horrible conditions, the sweatshops, the basically slave labor, and particularly for young women, it virtually borders on being inhumane. And so the whole world's kind of industrial system rests on them because they're the lowest cost labor and treated as the lowest cost labor. And it's destroyed the working class people in England. It's destroyed them in the United States. This is just why you saw the British government, with support from the Reform Party, just seized British steel from the Chinese Communist Party, because they're not going to tolerate this happening. What's happening to Lao Beijing, they're trying to impose that on British workers. It's just not going to fly.
Mm-hmm. So you touched really a great point, and thank you for your tireless advocacy for the Chinese people. Here, I wanted to ask you this question because I think
let me say one thing, Ava, before you get to your question, if you please, about my advocacy. I do it because I fell in love with China at a very early age, reading about China and studying China as a young person. And the reason, besides defending my country and wanting to make sure that I was a patriot and serve my country in my 20s in the Navy as a naval officer, the reason I wanted to go to the Pacific is I wanted to make sure I got a chance to go see all the battlefields of the Pacific War and to basically sail with the 7th Fleet, which was always a goal of mine, which was the great military entity, the 7th Fleet of the Pacific Fleet, that basically freed the people in Asia from the Imperial Japanese. But it was also a goal to eventually get to China. And, the day I arrived in Hong Kong is one of the most memorable days of my life. I instantly fell in love with Hong Kong and the Chinese people. And then later I was able to go to Shanghai and essentially kind of live there on and off for a couple of years, in and out doing business. I fell in love with Shanghai, and I'm never fallen in love with Beijing. It's a little too much like Washington, D.C. But I just have a great love of fondness for the Chinese people. There's some of the noblest, hardworking, sense of humor people in the world. And what has shocked me from the beginning is they're the last great civilization that's not free. And it's stunning to me in the 21st century, particularly, the argument is, the Chinese are like children. They need a strong hand. They need a strong parent. And that's why the Chinese Communist Party is there. And all the business in the world agrees with it. And I go, have you ever looked at Hong Kong or Taiwan? Or have you ever looked at the overseas Chinese in Singapore or in Southeast Asia or in Europe or the United States? I said, these are hardworking people. They're great citizens. They're law-abiding. Mm-hmm. They're family-oriented. They're very patriotic. Wherever they end up, they're very patriotic to their country. They're perfect citizens. I said, they could think of what China would be like if you had the same freedoms Taiwan had. You had the same freedoms Hong Kong had. You had the freedoms Singapore or anywhere in Southeast Asia, Australia, the United States, or Europe. It would be a world-class power that wouldn't be built on slave labor in concentration camps and run by a bunch of criminals, which is so obvious they're criminals. They know they're criminals. And the great shame, when time looks back here, we're all going to look great because we defended a great people in their search for freedom. The people that partnered with the dictators, the Wall Street people and the people in Silicon Valley, and now the people run around saying, you can't get into this trade war because it's going to raise prices X amount. All those people are going to be looked at in history just like the people that funded Hitler in the 1930s and funded the Bolsheviks. Right? So we're on the right side. We're on the side of right. We're on the side of the angels. We're on the side of the righteous here. And our fight to assist, we can't free the Chinese people. Only Lao Beijing can free the Chinese people. And anybody that supports that effort is going to get rewarded in heaven. Right? Because God, I know, looks down and says, hey, the Chinese people are, and this is why Christianity and Catholicism the underground churches are on fire. Because the Lao Beijing has a great heart and a great soul. And they understand, just like Eastern Europe under the Bolsheviks and the Germans under the Nazis, that these totalitarian dictatorships are atheistic and they want to warp you spiritually. And the Chinese people are fighting back every day in horrible conditions, in dangerous conditions. And that's why it's so ennobling to be even part of this, a small part of it.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen Bannon. Thank you, Mr. Bannon. So you touched something to my heart about the people, because it's not just the Chinese people, because we admit, from a lot of patriot Americans highlight the danger, the existential threat from the CCP. They're already here. So they're coming after the American people. So, and you once repeatedly mentioned how powerful is the American people, because they successfully put President Trump back in White Houses. the power lies within the American people. But everything just started the day that the election results announced, because the battle against the invisible enemy, a lot of them are literally within the United States. I mean, don't get me wrong, Trump almost lost his life pushing the people's agenda. And no one guaranteed that would not happen with the infiltration of the CCP, with the interests from the Wall Street, from Silicon Valley and deep states aligned with the CCP. So how can we empower the American people and let them understand what's really we're fighting for? This is a life and death. That's why I really wanted to see American people talking to Chinese people, and I want to see the power united, because we, at the end of the day, holding the cards. So my last question to you, Bannon, is last Tuesday, the Vice President J.D. Vance remarked, we borrowed money from Chinese peasants to buy the things those Chinese peasants manufactured. End of quote. The statement quickly became a new talking point for the CCP, fueling anti-American sentiment domestically in China. It's now being used to justify Beijing's harsh criticism and retaliatory tariffs against the United States. How can this administration, under Trump leadership, avoid playing into the CCP's hands, or even better, bypass the Chinese Communist Party completely and speak directly to the Chinese people who never voted for the CCP?
That's what I think gets to the source of the CCP's, failed legitimacy is the fact that they're not democratically elected. They have no broad popular support. Look, J.D. Vance is a very good man. He's got a good heart. And what he was saying was right. The way he said it was not optimal. They're not Chinese peasants. It's Lao Baijing is a term of endearment in China for old hundred names, which is essentially like the little guy that the whole system is supported by. It's Lao Baijing that is the backbone of China, just like the deplorables are here. So it's an unfortunate term, but he's a good man with a good heart. The deeper question is your question, is how do we actually make sure people know what this fight's really about? And it shouldn't be lost on you. Wall Street's not enthusiastic about this fight. The global corporatists are not enthusiastic about this fight. And the tech oligarchs are the least enthusiastic about this. So what do we have to do? We just have to work harder and make sure that we get our content. Your content is amazing. The content you guys put up on Getter is amazing. We have to make sure more Americans see it, more Americans are familiar with it. We're going up a huge learning curve. The United States of America, listen, overall, all the polling says that, people know this has to be done against the CCP. Now, people are worried about prices rising and a slowdown of the economy and all that, and those are all legitimate fears. I'm not saying they're irrational. In this case, I don't think they apply, but that has to be explained to them. So we have a fight. We have work to do. We have huge work. The effort you have, particularly now that Miles is not a day-to-day leader in the media because he's in prison, mm-hmm. right? It falls on you. It falls on a lot of young people to do that. And so far, it's incredibly impressive, particularly everything New Federal State and the whistleblower movement has been through. So I think it's just incumbent upon us, particularly on a Holy Thursday, to make sure that we just redouble our efforts and understand this is God's will, that God wants this to happen. Divine providence is on our side. We're on the side of the angels. Our fight for and with the Chinese people is a holy fight. This is almost like a crusade, and we just have to see it out to the bitter end. We're going to have good days and we're going to have bad days, and we're going to have days that looks like it's happening, and it's had days that looks like we're losing. Mm-hmm. But if we don't quit, we will win. And they know that. Yes. And the Chinese Communist Party knows that. So that's why I'm so proud to do the weekly show with you guys and mm-hmm. have you on War Room as often as possible to make sure people understand this. But I think right now, for the next couple of months, it's information warfare, and we have to be at the tip of the spear of that.
Yes, we will. And at the end of this, I just want to say thank you so much, Steve, and also the kind word, the confidence, and also the love you have for the Chinese people. It's the exact reason why a lot of Chinese people, especially the folks from the new federal state, loves you back. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. Have
Well,
a great Easter weekend.
You guys have a blessed Easter. You are the best of the best, and your fight is our fight, and we love you guys. And let's keep fighting for the Lao Beijing that are captured by these demons in Beijing on the mainland China. And if we don't quit, we'll win. And I thank you guys very much. Have a great Easter.
Take down the CCP.
Take down the CCP. Thank you so much.
Free Miles and Free
Free
Miles
Mile
Guo.
School.
Free Mile School.
Love you guys.
Love you. Bye-bye. Okay, that is the co-founder of the new federal state of China, Mr. Stephen K. Bannon. So thank you very much for joining us on this special day. And I wish everybody watching this program have a fantastic and blessed Easter weekend. God bless us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. See you next week.